Please stand. So welcome to this ordinary meeting of Hunters Hill Council. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please have a seat. So welcome everyone. We have no apologies this evening. Are there any declarations of interest? And we don't have a set of minutes from the last meeting at this stage. So it's an extraordinary meeting. We have a Merrill minute. Does everybody have a copy of the Merrill minute in front of them? Late item, yeah. Late item is a Merrill minute. Thank you. As you're aware, there's an issue with the processing facility at Woodlawn which we use, and the view is that MWU, or mixed waste organic output, shouldn't go to that facility in the future. And the details in here will give you some information about it. It's interesting because they're seeing as I understand, they're seeing the area as treating as if it is agricultural land. In fact, it's not agricultural land, but despite that, if you go back to what the issue is, the expert panel has advised that they do not expect any adverse health effects from past use of MWU on agricultural land, and yet that's what the issue seems to be at the moment. So I'll leave you to read that at your own leisure. NESROC is going to take this up on our behalf, and we'll see what happens to the EPA ban and whether that stays in place. So that's it. Are there any comments? Councillor Miles.
So this is not an endorsement of anything, this is just a note? Yeah.
Just a note, yeah. Just to make you aware. I was made aware of it a couple of days ago and we thought it was wise to get it out so you could all have a look at it and be aware of it. Councillor Williams.
So if it's not going to Woodlawn, where is it going?
Okay, sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, just to clarify, this Merrill minute is a similar Merrill minutes being presented to a number of other NESROC council meetings. The issue is that the EPA put a temporary ban on the use of MWU, which is mixed waste organic something. And they put a ban on that on agricultural land last October, a temporary ban. The EPA are now consulting with the industry and with councils about putting that in place as a permanent ban. The difference between the way in which we dispose of our MWU and other local governments or other councils is our MWU is not being distributed across agricultural land. It's actually going into the woodland facility, which is an old mining site, which was never intended to be agricultural land once the mine had actually been filled with MWU. So NESROC's looking at providing a response to the EPA's consultation paper, pointing out the difference between the woodland facility, where our MWU is going, versus where MWU would be going across and for use on agricultural land. So it's the intention of the Merrill Minute is to bring the matter to Council's attention, to flag that, and with a further report to come back.
So where it's going in the interim, I'm not quite sure, Councillor Williams.
I think they've been stockpiling at 6 October, just waiting for it.
Stockpiling,
At
Thank you. So I'll move the Merrill minute. I'll second it for that. Councillor Williams, thank you. All in favour? Thanks, that's unanimous. It's carried. So we'll move on to item 1.1, June 2009 review of the delivery program. Do you have a move for that? Councillor Crassoy, seconded. Councillor Williams. Councillor Crassoy, would you like to speak to it at all?
I know Councillor Councillor Williams has a lot of points he'd like to talk about, so I'll defer. Just
All right. Anybody wishing, so you've given up your right to speak on that then?
That's
So
fine.
anybody wishing to speak against? For?
Not against, but
Councillor Williams?
as Councillor Cresswell indicated, I've been through it thoroughly and I've got somewhere around 32 questions in relation to the document. So I was wondering how you would like to deal with that. We could be here a long time if we went through each of them, but
Would you be happy to document that and pass it on to the General Manager after the meeting?
rather than spend a lot of time translating here, I'd be happy to sit down and talk about it. Because
that's what I would want to do.
to go through it in detail would take quite a bit of time, I think. So is that an acceptable way for
It's acceptable.
the General
Yes.
Manager? You can either accept or reject my concerns. Like comment, no, not concerns, they're comments in terms of...
It's acceptable if you're happy to do that. Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have the volume of comments that Councillor Williams has, but there are a few I thought I would raise. On page 50, I note there's, I think there are issues that have gone to one of the committees, but the thing that's outstanding from there is there's a backlog of items that were accepted by council, which were recommendations of the former Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee. So they date back to sometime toward the end of 2018. Then I did notice on page 61, the third row down, number of working days taken to respond to applicants upon receipt of a DA. The target is 1, the actual performance is 3, but it's still got a tick, so the tick is inappropriate in that spot. There's also a reference on page 63 to the Community Advisory Panel, which I presume is meant to be Conservation Advisory Panel. One I thought I'd also comment on page 81, which is talking about community consultation and so on. It's dealt with generally over a number of points. One of the interesting things I thought I'd raise there is that one of the motions at the recent Local Government New South Wales conference was the raising of the fee payable for, or Local Government New South Wales will now take on, advocating that the fee for GIPA applications be increased from $30 to $60, which I believe you and I voted in favour of. The other side of that, I believe, is that we make information far more freely available, so that there'll be far less occasions when that information would be, or we need to go through the GIPA process. If people just simply get it on the website, or, you know, the worst case, that's a phone call to sort of verify where that can be found. So, I mean, I think that's a double-sided thing. We've got that's another area where we have to improve our community consultation by making information better available. Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any actions you'd like to make except to note those comments and work through them?
I'd just like those noted if we could. I get concerned about the things that were left over from the former Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion, Councillor? Councillor Miles.
Some questions with regards to
Page
50, the backlog, that Councillor Sanderson just referenced. In a lot of the items throughout the entire report, we have these this qualification data currently not available. Now, when it comes to the maintenance backlog referenced in Schedule 7, I guess we've discussed the maintenance backlog and its size for some time. When are we going to get some reliable data? I know that this report references an audit happening of the backlog and the size of the backlog and what that is going to look like. But my understanding is that it's increasing in size quite substantially. A lot of the different points that are referenced in this report have this insufficient data. And what I want to, I guess, see is in future iterations of this document that data set can be referenced. Because I think that having this insufficient data qualification into the future will be a dangerous thing to have. So particularly on the backlog, because I know that's a fairly burning issue. But generally throughout this report, there's a lot of missing data, and I know that the General Manager is conscious of that and that those need to be put in place. But I just noticed that reading through it, there are a lot of different areas of council that have data missing, essentially. In terms of page 19, council is financially sustainable. Apart from the special rate variation and the IPART increase in rateable revenue and the property committee, there's not a lot of meat on that bone. We're about to debate and discuss an item that once again puts us in a deficit position. And I think that this area, particularly item 1.7.1 on page 19, the future revenue streams from council is something we need to hone in a lot more on, because it's just something that's not nearly beefy enough in terms of the position that we're in now and the position that we're going to find ourselves in if we have recurring deficits as we have for the last 7 years I've been on council at least. So that's my piece.
Right, thank you, Councillor. I think some of those issues may be covered in the next bit. Should we cover them now, some of the issues?
Can I, through Mr Mayor, just to talk to the point about the asset data and the comment about insufficient data. So council would be aware that that Hunters Hill employed its first ever asset management engineer late last year. Since that time, he has been looking at our assets and the conditions of those and looking at the asset management plan. In the 18-19 year, council also allocated funds for investment in technology, and part of that investment, because of the approach we've taken, we've been able to actually achieve much more out of the funds that were allocated in the 18-19 year, to include the purchase of ASCETIC, which is an asset management system. And that will represent the first asset management system that this council has had. As part of that, IMG will be undertaking thorough condition assessments of all our asset classes. So I acknowledge that that information isn't there, but we're taking active steps. We have been taking active steps to ensure that we have detailed and robust asset data, and that will continue until next year. In relation to some of the other data, again, the investment that the council allocated funds for in 18-19 will help us with that. So you would have noticed in the update that we've recently purchased at the time this was written, we're investigating a customer request management system. That is now in place. That was put in place in August. And what that does is it's through our new website, and it enables people to lodge requests that actually automatically go through to the works team and are programmed, and then advice going back to the resident. What that means is now we can more accurately track response times and track the types of requests. So again, going backwards, I can't change that. Going forwards, we're looking at those systems that will give us solid data upon which to make decisions, so better evidence base. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councillor Miles, is anything in particular we've missed in
No.
just briefly?
Well, it's probably more of a issue. The revenue issue is probably more of an issue for the council rather than the staff.
Sure.
But,
Perhaps that's an issue for the next
next item.
item. All right, so any further comments, councillors?
Right.
Right reply, Councillor Crassel.
Mr Mayor, I would just like to send my thanks to the General Manager and to the senior staff and everyone who put this report together. I found it much easier to read this year, much easier to understand. I appreciated the frankness and the honesty about the fact that there are still some issues that we don't have all the details on. And as you say, that evidence-based process will get better and better, and it fills me with hope. I like the streamlining of processes and the reporting of them. We see that all the time. I know it's documented here, but we do see it every week, and it's getting better and better. And your organisational efficiencies as well. And I think this does have fiscal benefits, and I'm looking forward to the improvements that will bring. For example, a lot of the things that you see in here, you'll have noticed when you read them in the annual comment, you'll see that many of the things are mentioned in many of the columns, addressing lots of different actual issues because of the way you've efficiently managed how you apply these. So, for example, by partnering with Lane Cove for a traffic safety officer, we suddenly have an opportunity for some funding to double the amount of time that we have that person. Once we have a traffic safety officer on the ground, then we have access to more grant funding to deliver better outcomes around our schools and streets. And so I really appreciate the way you've been so wise, and I've appreciated your advice, but I see it written here as well for anyone else who wants to see it. Whenever I have a question about parking or roads or anything, you all can answer it, and I'm looking forward to next year's. I think it's just getting better and better, and I congratulate you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I agree. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Move on to item 1.2. The referral for audit of the draft 2018-19 financial reports and the adoption of capital works and carryover projects for the 19-20 year. Move Councillor Williams. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crassel. Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, again, I've got some questions here, but I'm not a financial person to fully answer those questions. But it's a comprehensive statement. The staff have done their due diligence. I have a few questions relating to benchmarking and things, but fundamentally, I think it's an accurate and clear statement on where we are at the moment. And at the moment, we're still working on our way towards financial sustainability. And I don't think this document is about how we achieve that. It's about reporting on where we've been and where we're expecting to get to in the particular budgeting cycle.
As we have a mover and a seconder, and I think I might ask the General Manager if she'd like to ask to give some overview of this.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The report, the detailed financial statements here prepared in accordance with accounting standards. They were presented to our Audit Risk and Improvement Committee a couple of weeks ago, and they've endorsed them to come forward to Council. What you're being asked to do tonight is to refer them to audit. The auditors have been in reviewing them, and subject to Council approving tonight, we would refer them to audit. They'd be audited officially, and we'd be notified of that. And I would expect we'd probably have the audited financials back before Council next week, and potentially have the auditors in attendance to answer any questions. Once they're endorsed there, they need to be put on public exhibition for a period of 7 days, and then they'll come back to Council again. So a few opportunities for us to come back to council. That's the process. What I've tried to do on page 94 is pick out a few of those, I guess, significant items, things I look for when I look at a set of financial statements. The reported surplus for the year, the operating surplus was 986,000. When we did the third quarter review, we expected a surplus of 875,000. So we're not too different to that, but there have been some significant ups and downs. The $1 million of bus shelter income we expected to get last year wasn't received. Contracts have now been signed, so when we do the September review, we'll bring that back into the 2019-20 budget. But we also had some savings, quite significant savings that we expected in employee costs. We're still having a closer look at that, but retirements and some turnover would have contributed to that figure. And I've also reported on a couple of items that were taken out of the budget earlier in the year, particularly property development activity and new parking fees. So that's a surplus figure we've got. When you take out capital items, capital income items, we are left with a deficit of 495,000. And as I said before in previous reports, that's something that would be best to try and get back to a break-even situation. We have a number of things in place, and a few of them were referenced in the previous report. We are doing some significant work with our property strategy now and with the new property strategy committee. And it's got a number of aims, but from a financial point of view, one of its significant objectives is to get an ongoing source of revenue from property income that we can bring into our budget. We also have as you know, subsequent to June, we've got a new arrangement for our library service. The sort of savings that's going to produce over the next 5 years will be equivalent to what our forecast operating deficits were over those 5 years. So that's quite a significant thing to bring into the budget, and that'll be another one we'll bring into the September review. And as well as that, we've got the shared services. Continuing to look for some of those opportunities we've already taken and are reflected in last year and this year's budget, but we'll continue to look for some of those. So there's certainly some things in train to deal with those budget deficits that we identified when we adopted the budget earlier this year. Our year-end cash, particularly the unrestricted cash, is very well. Very, very high. It continues to be. We expected it to be about $11.3 million. It's now 12.2. There's a number of things that have contributed to that, and one of them is that there was a fair degree of unspent works at the end of the year, and that's something that we'll be addressing, particularly around how our project management can be improved so that we don't have that situation occur to that extent at the end of 2019-20. But from a financial point of view, that is a significant amount of cash. It gives us an unrestricted current ratio. In other words, how much for every dollar of what we owe, how many dollars of what we have is there. So we've actually got $8 to $1, which is fairly high for a council. Our rates and charges outstanding are a little bit higher than what they were last year, but still at a very acceptable level. There's a few asset ratios there. We've had, with our new asset engineer, he's done some better assessments of what we think the asset situation is in terms of backlog, in terms of what we should be spending compared to what we are spending, and those figures are reported there. They are higher than last year. They still aren't based on, as we talked about before, on actual condition data, but they're based on, I guess, informed estimates by our asset engineer. And they'll be confirmed later this year and early next year. As I mentioned, we have a list of carryover works. They're included in the report. The operating deficit, which we originally thought would be $426,000, with those carryovers takes it to $887,000. But we've yet to bring in the $1 million for the bus shelter income. That'll come in as in the budget estimates for when we do the September review in a few weeks' time. It's probably the main points I want to touch on, but if there's certainly any questions, happy to take it.
Councillor Collins.
Through you, Mr Mayor. How much the legal fees refunded? Was that booked as income this year?
Would have been, yeah.
And how much was that?
I have to take it on notice.
Okay.
So legal fees recovered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get that figure back to you.
Councillor Miles.
Equally with grants, the $1.2 million worth of grant funding that was received by state and federal governments, is that counted in income?
It is. Yeah.
It is.
It is, and the accounting standards have changed, so we will need to, if that money remains unspent at the end of next year, we will need to adjust our balance sheet and move that over as a liability.
Liability,
And
so that would be a significant liability.
yeah, so in future, the grant income that isn't spent, there's other technical conditions around it, because the spent becomes a liability rather than income in the year it's received. It's a little bit back to the future in that sense.
Please clarify to me how that was there.
Go ahead.
So just on page 94, under the KPIs, could you just help me to understand where in the 2017-18 actual figure on, let's say, the buildings and infrastructure renewal ratio being 36.36 and it goes down to 26.38, what is that number actually reflective of? The building and infrastructure renewal ratio, does that mean that 36% of the renewable standards that should be being met in a year are being met, or is that 36% of?
And sorry, if it helps, I also would like to ask the same question about the asset maintenance ratio.
Yeah, okay. So the building and infrastructure renewal ratio, that's basically saying of your how much your assets are depreciating, how much of that are you actually spending in renewing them. So the benchmark for that one is 100%. So however much your assets are degrading, and that's measured by the depreciation calculation, how much of that are you actually spending on renewing them. So you would think it should be 100%. The estimate we've got is 26%.
In actuals this year, so if a building under council's ownership is deteriorating, not deteriorating, but is depreciating at a ratio of 100%, we are only spending 26% of that deterioration on renewing that. If
a building is, let's say, degraded $10,000 during the year, we're only spending $2,600 renewing.
Yeah.
That's how you might want to think about it.
And that's the same principle for the asset maintenance ratio.
The asset maintenance ratio, similar thing. How much you should be spending, how much you are spending compared to how much you should be spending.
That's quite a drop.
As I said, it's based on some better estimates, and we've whilst they are estimates, we've ground truthing a bit with some recent work we've been doing on even this building, but some of our other buildings on how much we think we should be spending on them.
Councillor Miles.
The special Schedule 7 KPIs are not being audited. I assume that means that they're not being audited for this financial year. But when we presumably receive an asset report at the end of this year in subsequent budgets, that will be audited.
They won't be auditors themselves, won't be auditing them, but when we get better condition data, there'll be more science behind the whole thing there. So the auditors themselves it's not a schedule that's the auditors look at. Well, they look at it, but it's not the records yet.
And again, apologies, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. I guess that condition data is due to come to Council before the end of the year.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I might go to the Director. Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we've had the roads audited. We're waiting for those results. Footpaths will be done next month. But the building, marine assets and parks and recreational assets are not due till early next year. So they haven't all been audited yet. The plan is we'll get the results and then we'll work towards putting together an asset management plan to bring back to you.
Can I just add, Mr Mayor, I've just in relation to two of those questions, page 167 actually has the formulas that sit behind those asset ratios. That helps.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can I add something?
Yep. General Manager?
So, thank you, Mr Mayor. Also, what I would say with the assets is the work that we're doing with the property strategy. So it's looking at our long-term, looking at the resourcing strategies that we're putting together and looking at that holistically. So we're looking at the asset management plan, which is the work that the Director Service Delivery and his team are doing. The long-term financial plan, which is the work that the Director Corporate Services is doing, but also our property strategy as well, and how we take some of those properties forward may well address some of the maintenance issues that exist with those. So it is an integrated approach, and over the next 6 months we'll start to bring all that asset data together with the work that's emerging out of the Property Advisory Committee, as well as some of the areas that the Directors mentioned with the long-term financial plan and the shared services and technology.
Councillor Miles.
And through you to the General Manager, I guess, again, the fourth dot point on page 94, the removal of originally budgeted income from property development activity, $208,000, and new parking fees, $150,000, as there is no activity strategy in place, 2018-19. What was the property development activity that is associated with the $208,000, and what was the new parking fees associated with the $150,000? Sorry,
I'm not.
Be through you, Barry.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I suppose we're not entirely. That those items appeared in the budget. I think the property development one might have talked about new property, so I think the council might have envisaged having some new investment in property. Probably in some ways the sort of
just pre
through I might just to clarify, Mr Mayor, councillors may recall that the strategic workshop we had in February, we discussed there were 2 items that appeared to be put in the budget prematurely, and there didn't appear to be solid project plans sitting behind those estimates. So I believe they were removed at the March end of quarter review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Just a question on the just on the Schedule 7. Now that you've got these figures and there's a little bit more science behind them, how confident are you of them?
I feel they're better than last year's, but I think I'll wait confirmation of the condition data before we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Just a question, if I could, through you to most appropriate officer to
General Manager.
But in relation to the asset maintenance ratio, as we get improved data about condition of roads and so on, I presume that will give us the potential to address that maintenance and could potentially see that ratio rise from the currently predicted level?
But through you, Mr Mayor, the ratio may be revised. As the Director said, the work that's happening currently with the asset management system and the condition audits will provide more robust data. What I would say is with the property strategy and some of the elements of that have the opportunity to be a funding source for road renewals because of the nature of those properties. So again, it's the integration between the asset management plan, long-term financial and the property strategy.
Can I just add something to that? I made just a brief comment in the bottom of that report about once we have this data back, it can be turned into a program of works that can illustrate what can happen if you upfront fund some of the work now rather than spread it over a number of years. There's obviously a funding solution that needs to be found for that, but if you do it up front, what you are avoiding is the the future maintenance costs of the degradation of some of those roads. So there's a business case built in there, and with the historically low interest rates, you know, if you line that business case up with a funding scenario, that would actually result in what you've said. So your renewal would have to be happening a lot earlier than what you might otherwise.
Is that clear? So clarify that? Good to you. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Collins.
No, but I'll speak when questions are done.
All right. Are you wishing to speak for the recommendation? Against the recommendation?
Oh, no, well,
For the recommendation?
Yes, but I will speak to it.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I am a financial person, so I think I might just outline some of my concerns that I have. It's interesting that that everyone seems to be asking questions about asset maintenance. When I raised this in a motion in February that everybody voted against, I actually asked Councillor Miles and I brought a motion that Council undertakes a review of all infrastructure assets and bring back a report to Council in March outlining the estimated cost to bring all infrastructure assets up to a satisfactory standard. We have a major problem here. Now that we have got more accurate data, the estimated cost to move everything out from a poor to a very poor standard, to bring all that to a satisfactory standard, the current estimate is $27.8 million. Now, at the moment, Council has around about $12 million, I think, unrestricted cash. So we actually do not have, if these figures are correct, and they seem to be more correct than last year when the figure was actually $3.9 million. So it's $24 million that's just appeared on the asset maintenance backlog. This has been going on for, obviously, this hasn't happened in a year. This has been happening for 10 years, maybe longer. And we are not in a financially sustainable position where we can actually fund and pay for bringing this council up to a satisfactory standard. All those fit for the future ideas, they're actually not there. We are not sustainable. We do not have the money to do what we need to do. We're relying on a property strategy. We're doing some great things here. The library, fantastic. I wish we would have done that a year ago when I suggested we change the deal. But no one would support it. That would have saved us $400,000. And the whole period of changing from asking Lane Cove whether or not we could partner with them to their response was 15 days. That's all it took. 15 days, and now we're going to save $400,000 a year. Councillor Miles brought a property strategy, and we're basically relying on that to actually be sustainable in the future. If that doesn't come about, then what are we going to do? Now, I thank the General Manager for bringing this report and bringing accuracy to these numbers, because now we have to realise that it's not plain sailing here at all. We are in a dire financial position. It is absolutely dire. We cannot fund what we need to do. The only reason we have cash there is because we haven't spent it. If we look at the 2019 required maintenance, $4.98 million, compared to the actual maintenance, it's 1.8. So there's a $3 million difference just in this year. Now I understand, General Managers have started, everything's up in the air while we're just trying to find our feet, but we actually need to probably spend over the next 5 years an additional $5 million just to bring things up to scratch. So our deficits for the next 5 years are not $500,000 a year, it'll be $5 million a year. And we're going to have to borrow money in order to sustain that. We'll have to go to T-Corp and get a loan. We can get it for, 1.75%. I can't imagine it taking less than 5 years to bring everything up. If you look at the comparison between the gross replacement costs, it's all the gross replacement cost of our assets, $123 million. And the estimated cost just to bring that up to scratch is $27.8 million. That's 22% of all our assets are defunct. I'm at a loss to understand why, when I bring up this about footpaths, that we need to do something about it. Why a simple motion just to bring our assets up to scratch would be denied purely for political reasons. We should have been on this a long time ago. But councillors here have been dragging their feet. Thankfully, the motion that I put, staff have gone and done it anyway. No thanks to us. Maybe they could have done it sooner. I really don't understand what some people are, expect to be doing here. Now, we are not fit for the future. We are in dire straits financially. We need to pull together and come up with some solutions to actually get us out of this mess. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad that it's come to the surface so we can deal with it. But I just want to stress that this is a very concerning situation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any further discussion required? Councillor Miles.
I too am a financial person. Not forgetting the maintenance backlog, because that's a really important issue, and I take Councillor Williams' point that this is a reporting document, so it's not actually going to give effect to any change, but it is a reflection on what position council's currently in. What position we're in is with a special rate variation, with an increased rate base, with $300,000 give or take back in court costs from the amalgamation debate, and probably a little bit more from other court wins, with $1.2 million in grant funding from the state and federal governments, with give or take $850,000 in staffing cost improvement, and with the potential for bus shelter contract lump sum payment of $1 million, we're still in the red. That's a really seriously bad position to be in. For putting aside for the moment the backlog issue and trying to get things up to standard, the fact that we haven't seen a surplus, operational surplus, in Huntersville Council in my time here, 7 years, the fact that we have this growing maintenance issue and we still can't reach operational surplus, and it is not reflective of the General Manager or the staff, because I know that they're doing their best to shine a light on what has been a long period of complacency when it comes to these issues. We have some serious groundwork to do to get this council back up to the standard that I think ratepayers expect of us in our operations and our maintenance backlog. A property strategy is great. Property strategy should have been done many years ago with a lot of our ailing assets. The library, equally, should have been done last term, but it wasn't done, wasn't addressed. All these issues have not been addressed for a very, very, very long time. And only now are we starting to shine a light on exactly what position we are in, and it is not a good one. So obviously I will vote for the report because it is just a set of financials that needs to go to audit. But in reflecting on the document, we have some serious work to do in council.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Any further discussion? Councillor Crassoy.
For every EOR, there has to be a bit of tigger in a conversation. And I just have to say, I think it's a really positive place we're in. We were down below the decks for a long time. I wasn't on the last term of council with you, Councillor Miles, but as you say, perhaps there's more that could have been done back then. I'm looking forward to seeing this property strategy that you say Councillor Miles has developed, because we haven't seen that yet, so that's exciting. I'm also looking forward to the work of the property committee. But we're in a position that was frightening, and I don't mind sharing, when the General Manager started, I said I feel like we're under the decks plugging holes, and I want to come up on deck, and I want to see the ship moving forward. I feel like we are up on deck. Sure, we're still in some deep water, but I see a way forward, and the report back on the audit and the draft going forward, the advice of our experts in council will only continue to see us go that way. And I'm not just relying on the property and $1 million here or there. I'm relying on the demonstrated expertise that we have in council. And so congratulations again. And to me, the future looks bright. I'm looking forward to all the advice that council management team offer us.
Question, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly.
Of Councillor Crassoy, maybe could you elaborate on, you said you see a way forward. Perhaps we could discuss those, or I'd like to hear more about that if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Are we going into open council or we have
Sure.
a cup of tea?
I don't have a problem with that.
You're positive about the way forward. You were saying that. Can you give some examples of why you're positive about the way forward?
Well, so for example, again, that the senior staff and general manager haven't been afraid to show us the real position that we're in, which over the last term of council you were unable to see, it would seem, and it's frightening. But the mere fact that you see it and admit you've got it means you're in actually a real position. You're not under the deck anymore, plugging holes whether you know they exist or not. You're actually in a position to see the map in front of you and the direction you need to go in, with advice from senior staff such as Barry over here suggesting that perhaps we need to look at more efficient ways to make use of the low interest rates at the moment and maybe do some heavier investing. Or I just feel like what we've seen here, it's far from pretty, but it's actually real now. And I would have thought with a financial background that that's a much better position to be in. Sure, we can pack up our bats and balls and go home. We can do that, and I know you'd like to, but actually, we could actually look at this and go, well, here we are with what's really in front of us.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I heard a lot of analogies, but nothing of any substance. But I don't suspect I'm going to get any. But that's fine.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. Councillor Sanderson?
I wonder whether I could ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor,
You can.
to whoever is the most appropriate member of staff to answer. I mean, maintenance backlog is rife throughout the whole of New South Wales. How does this council compare with other councils?
Well, it is a problem in lower government generally, but there's some comparative data. There's some recent stuff being issued by the Office of Government which would probably be useful information to bring back to council that would answer that question. Covers the comparative data across every council in the state and groups it with our like councils, etc. So perhaps that would be the best way to respond with that.
It was certainly an issue raised at the local government conference, the backlog, and they said it was widespread and they were seeking assistance from state government to help wipe out that backlog. So, are there any further? Do you have another question?
Well, if I could ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to again, appropriate member of staff to answer, but I'm not a financial person, but I see the fact that we have maintenance backlog, a fair amount of depreciation. I don't see it in the last terms that Councillor Collins does. Would staff like to comment on my perception of the situation?
Look, could I make a suggestion, councillors? Perhaps this is something we should refer back to a workshop. We should have a look at it. We can get some information on other councils. We can have I'll be back to you in a moment, councillor.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe we could have a look at what other councils we look at again, the things which have been done, what our property strategy is, the impact of the library, savings going forward in the future, what would have happened if the $1 million had fallen in the last financial year? How would that affect the results? And we can work through that together as a group and cover that with some expert help. Now, I respect Councillor Collins' understanding of this area. That's his area of expertise, and I appreciate your comments, Councillor Collins. And I think that will be very helpful if we do get to, if you do decide you would like to workshop it.
Sure.
And I think you'll be very helpful in that meeting. So,
But I do have a, I can actually answer the question for Councillor Sanderson if you're...
please, go ahead.
I have the figures here for Lane Cove Council, just to do a bit of a comparison. Now, Lane Cove Council, the estimated cost to bring all their assets up to a satisfactory standard in their 2019 reports that they've just referred to audit is $2.9 million. As compared to ours of being 27 million. So we're about 10 times, our backlog is about 10 times bigger. And to put that in perspective, our gross replacement cost of assets, that's the cost of all the assets, is 123 million, whereas Lane Cove is 509 million. So they're about 3.5 times bigger than us, and yet we have a backlog 10 times bigger.
Thanks,
So
Councillor. Thanks,
this
Councillor.
isn't
Actually,
to
Councillor
our
Collins, I
council.
think the question was how do we compare to other councils in New South Wales?
Yeah, that's Lane
Not
Cove.
directly to our next door neighbour. So
Oh, it's
I
the
think
best
we
way
can
to
get
compare,
some more.
isn't it, wouldn't you think?
We could get some more information on other councils. Yep.
Could I just make one comment? I mean, I think we're all very well aware that Lane Cove is about one of the most financially well-off councils.
I think I don't think we'll just debate the point at the moment. I think the
We can go through right if
the
you
question
like.
is, can we get some more information on other councils? We've heard how Lane Cove is at the moment. We'll get some other information. So we'll come back to you and see if you do think that's a worthwhile pursuit to put that together as part of a workshop and look through that.
If I
So-
can recommend, can we have that as a council report then, perhaps?
A workshop is a council report.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be good to bring the report back. I think, once, to find out, if we're going to suggest that this is completely okay and it's rife everywhere, then let's get that data out there and make it public.
Let's stop there because I think you are off the track a little. Nobody's suggesting it is rife and it's all out there. Council was asking what's happening in other councils. Let's look at it.
I answered.
Let's find it. You answered it for Lane Cove. Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
doing
that.
very well.
So I think we're towards the end of the discussion. Councillor Williams, I think you moved this.
I did.
Do you wish to make final closing comments?
Yes. Mr.
Or
Mayor.
write a reply if you prefer
Right,
me to call
reply.
that?
That'll end the debate and the discussion. Mr. Mayor, we've heard a lot of doomsdaying around the table, a lot of personal opinion, facts that I don't have before me, so therefore I would treat with a question mark as to the relevance and where they stand in the whole debate. I've had a lot of experience in government at a senior level, dealing with massive budgets and also with very complex organisations. And government as a whole, whether it's local, state or federal, tends to have a backlog in the work that it does. This council is no different. Councils in general, and it was amplified at the recent local government conference, that councils are squeezed from every level, and particularly from both state through cost shifting and limiting of the ability to gain revenue, and from the federal level with their FAGS grants, which are virtually half of what they should be. So it is not unique to Hunters Hill to be squeezed by financial constraints placed on it by other organisations. I don't see anywhere here in this report that reflects the dire consequences which some of the councillors are referred to. I would expect the General Manager to have raised those issues very clearly with us, but that's not in the report. It's been to the Audit Committee as well, and they're not raising those issues either. So I respect the General Manager's report here. I also comment that we're going through a transition period at the moment. Since the General Manager arrived 12 months ago, there's been enormous changes in not only how the council operates, but its relationships and ability to leverage off other external factors. as well as the opportunities to put new systems and concepts in place. And that is also extended to new staff and new ideas. I share Councillor Creswell's view. I think we do have an optimistic future. We are doing what's necessary to set ourselves up for the future. No organisation like a council, with the exception of a couple, do actually get themselves into a position where everything is 100% secure and sorted. I think we do have a lot of opportunities available to us as we move forward with our General Manager's guidance. And the library is a classic example where we can make significant savings. And I think once we see the property committee's outcomes, we'll see even further savings. So, Mr. Mayor, I do not share this doomsday view. I commend the staff on pulling together this report, and I look forward to moving forward in an optimistic and positive way. I don't see those issues that have been raised around the table reflected in the report I have before me.
I have a question.
Thank you, Councillor.
I have a question.
No.
Point of order, Mr. I have a question. I'm
no,
entitled
you-
to a question.
You can't.
Am I not allowed a
No,
question?
not at this
Am
point.
I being denied a question?
No, it's a procedural matter, and once the right reply is held, we need to hold the vote. So
Well, let's hide it then.
I'll put Councillor Collins, I'll put the recommendation there on page 93. Those in favour? Against? That's carried, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Any further issues we need to raise tonight? Councillor Collins, you have a question at this point?
Oh, well, I did, but I think we've swept that all. I just wanted to check whether or not Councillor Williams actually had a special Schedule 7 attached to his report, because he said the data wasn't included in it.
Oh, I don't think he does have that attached to his report. Do you have
Do
that
you have a
attached?
special
You do?
Schedule 7 that outlined the maintenance backlog of $27 million?
Yeah. So the meeting's actually now been closed, so thank you very much, councillors.